Good evening, and to our Arabic speakers, I say Salamu Alaikum. Jesus of Nazareth is the most influential person who ever lived. 20th centuries after his death, he continues to exert his power of fascination over the minds of men and women. But who is Jesus really? I believe that the key to answering that question lies in the purported fact of his resurrection. If Jesus really did rise from the dead, then he must have been who he claimed to be. And therefore, we've come together tonight to discuss the question, did Jesus of Nazareth rise from the dead? Now, it's important for you to understand that in our discussion, I'm not going to treat the New Testament as an inspired and therefore inerrant book, but simply as a collection of ordinary Greek documents coming down out of the first century. I'm not interested, therefore, in discussing the inerrancy of the Gospels. Rather, we're interested in determining what facts they credibly establish concerning Jesus' fate and what is the best explanation of those facts. Accordingly, in tonight's debate, I'm going to defend two basic contentions. One, the New Testament documents establish 5 facts concerning Jesus: his crucifixion, his burial in a tomb, the discovery that his tomb was empty, his post-mortem appearances, and the origin of the disciples' belief in his resurrection. And 2, the best explanation of these facts is that God raised Jesus from the dead. So let's look at that first contention together. I'm going to share with you 5 facts about the historical Jesus which are accepted by the majority of New Testament historians today. Fact number 1, Jesus was tried and executed by crucifixion. All right? Okay. Fact number 1 then was that Jesus was tried and executed by crucifixion. According to the Gospels, Jesus was condemned by the Jewish high court on the charge of blasphemy and then delivered over to the Romans for execution for treason for claiming to be king of the Jews. Not only are these facts multiply attested by independent biblical sources like Paul and the Acts of the Apostles, but they are also confirmed by extra-biblical sources. From the Jewish historian Josephus and the Syrian writer Marabar Serapion, we learn that Jewish leaders made a formal accusation against Jesus and participated in the events leading up to his crucifixion. From the Babylonian Talmud, we learn that Jewish involvement in the trial was explained as a proper undertaking against a heretic. And from Josephus and the Roman historian Tacitus, we learn that Jesus was crucified by Roman authority under the sentence of Pontius Pilate. According to Luke Johnson, a New Testament historian at Emory University, the support for the mode of his death, its agents, and perhaps its co-agents, is overwhelming. Jesus faced a trial before his death, was condemned, and executed by crucifixion. Perhaps the single most egregious error found historically in the Quran is its claim that Jesus was not in fact crucified, Surah 4, 157. Not only is there not a single shred of evidence for this remarkable hypothesis, but the evidence supporting Jesus' crucifixion is, as Johnson says, overwhelming. No historian believes that Jesus was not crucified. The crucifixion of Jesus is recognized even by the most radical critics as, to quote Robert Funk, one indisputable fact. Indeed, Paula Fredrickson, a skeptical critic, declares flatly the crucifixion is the strongest single fact we have about Jesus. Fact number 2, after his crucifixion, Jesus was buried by Joseph of Arimathea in a tomb. This fact is highly significant because it means that the location of Jesus' tomb was known. New Testament historians have established the fact of Jesus' honorable burial on the basis of evidence such as the following. 1. Jesus' burial is attested in the very old information handed on by Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians. In the 15th chapter, Paul writes, "For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. This old information handed on by Paul has been dated to within 5 years of Jesus' crucifixion. The second clause in the formula refers to Jesus' burial. Comparison of this 4-line formula to the gospel narratives on the one hand and to the sermons in the Acts of the Apostles on the other hand reveals that the second clause is a summary in outline form of the story of Jesus' burial by Joseph in a tomb. Number 2, the burial story is part of very old source material used by Mark in writing his gospel. Since Mark is the earliest of the Gospels, his source material goes back even closer to the events of Jesus' life. And thus we have very early, independent attestation of the burial in both Mark and Paul. 3, as a member of the Jewish high court that condemned Jesus, Joseph of Arimathea is unlikely to be a Christian invention. There was an understandable hostility in the early church toward the Jewish leaders who, in Christian eyes, had engineered a judicial murder of Jesus. Thus, according to the late New Testament scholar Raymond Brown, Jesus' burial by Joseph is very probable since a Christian fictional creation of a Jewish Sanhedrist who does what is right by Jesus is almost inexplicable. 4, the burial story lacks any signs of legendary development. Dale Allison, an eminent historical Jesus scholar, observes, Mark's story of Jesus' burial by Joseph contains neither fantastic elements nor Christian motifs, and so creates no impression of being a legend. 5, no other competing burial story exists. If the story of Jesus' burial were a legendary fiction which arose much later than the original event, then it's strange that we have no traces at all of the real account or even competing legendary stories. The unanimity of the burial traditions speaks in favor of the reliability of the gospel account. For these and other reasons, the majority of New Testament critics concur that Jesus was buried by Joseph of Arimathea in a tomb. According to the late John A.T. Robinson of Cambridge University, the burial of Jesus in the tomb is one of the earliest and best attested facts about Jesus. Fact number 3, on the Sunday after the crucifixion, Jesus' tomb was found empty by a group of his women followers. Among the reasons which have led most scholars to this conclusion are the following. 1, the old information transmitted by Paul implies the empty tomb. The expression, he was raised, following the expression, he was buried, implies an empty tomb. A first-century Jew could not have thought otherwise. The reference is being made here to Jesus' empty tomb is again evident by comparing this 4-line formula with the gospel narratives and with the book of Acts. The third line is a summary of the empty tomb narrative.